Welcome back, everybody, to our three-part special today. I am Nick, and if you haven't seen the first two parts, they are linked above. Our third topic is cultural appropriation is a term that's thrown around in the media and often highly politicized. What is cultural appropriation? Where does it fit in 2021, especially under the Biden presidency? And for you, the audience, yes, I am a non-party affiliated host. I'm going to bring up, because we don't have Republicans here, more of what their points are going to be to draw more out of our guests so that you can get all of the meat and potatoes of the argument. So under Biden, Rez, what does cultural appropriation mean? Can you tell us what it is and what we should expect to see?
So I don't think President Biden is going to go out and define cultural appropriation. I think so. Cultural appropriation is a thing that just exists within, it's just going to exist within American culture and just American talk over social media. What it is essentially is when a dominant culture appropriates a culture from a minority group. A famous example of cultural appropriation was the Washington football team, the team name, the team slogan that they used, which I'm not going to mention that word, but essentially refers to Native Americans. And there was a lot of controversy with that. There was also controversy regarding a couple, like back in 2014, in a Beyonce music video where she dressed up in South Asian garments. And there was a lot of backlash against that video because she was quote unquote appropriating Indian culture. Another example is when Israelis were appropriating the keffiyeh, which is a Palestinian scarf, black and white, and it's often worn by Palestinians through their history and culture. And it's a symbol of resistance. It's something that they wear around their neck and cover their face when they attend protests. And they claim that it was being culturally appropriated by the Israelis to make dresses out of them. Something like this requires nuance, in my opinion. Like we, in America, I believe we are a melting pot, and in a society like the United States, different cultures will sometimes mesh together. And in my opinion, it's all about your intention. But I know that others may have a different opinion. If I saw someone, a white American, wear something that was representative of Bengali culture, I probably would not be offended. No, not probably. I most likely would not be offended. I just think that it would be cool or amusing. But I know others would feel that way. And this is something that requires nuance rather than hard lines. There was a lot of controversy a couple of years ago about girls dressing in Moana costume, and it was talked about all over the internet. I personally would not find that offensive, but then others might, and that's why nuance is required in this discussion.
To that point, Angela, does that bring up cancel culture? I mean, I'm Italian. Obviously, my last name is Cassiotti. If my father has an Italian restaurant and wants to sell spaghetti to everybody, is that something to be canceled over? I mean, is that cultural appropriation, right? And real more specifically, to Rez's point, shouldn't, in some instances, cultural appropriation be celebrated? We want to eat Indian food. We want to eat Italian food. We want to eat Russian food. We don't want to just sit here and eat potatoes all day long. So to the nuance of it, is there a point to be made? And are people then just too sensitive?
I think that your example about Italian culture being appropriated is a really good example, because 200 years ago, Italians weren't considered white people in the United States. And now they are. And now, Italian culture is part of white people and white people culture. People can decide whether or not that's a good or a bad thing, but it just shows that these things shift, and to try to look at them under just like such a microscopic lens, with tunnel vision is not the way to do it. I think that cultural appropriation is a term that people bandy about to call people racist when they're really just appreciating something that's outside of maybe their everyday culture or their ethnicity. And I think that we're definitely too sensitive about it because for example, people who are really into anime and Japanese culture, they're excited about it. They love it. I don't think that that's a bad thing. Taking an Indian headdress and lighting it on fire and stomping on it, I wouldn't call that cultural appropriation. I'd call that being a horrible person.
Yeah,
But
that's clearly hate.
Right? But it's also a free speech thing. So we can say, okay, that's your constitutionally protected right or whatever. You're still a crappy person for doing that. People view burning the Bible and the flag in the same way. It's a very polarizing act. So I think that Rez is right. There's nuance to this discussion, and we need to be a little bit less sensitive about it and try to look at maybe different acts and people's intentions when we talk about it.
I mean, to that point, Austin, Greens are typically more all-encompassing of cultures, right? That's typically their message from what we hear. They're encompassing of all cultures. And in a lot of the cases, to what Rez brought up, in football teams or in butter, we're not going to name names, but if there is a licensed figure and then they remove that figure, I mean, it's hard to understand that who was offended when that figure was licensed to those particular companies or organizations. Like, who is the person that is offended in that scenario?
Yeah, like Angela mentioned, it's all changing all the time. Again, white people, Italians were not considered white people for the longest time, and now they have been assimilated into the white supremacy construct we have in the United States. It's all completely relative to the time and to the situation. If you're invited to your friend's traditional Korean wedding, you're kind of expected to wear a hanbok no matter who you are. And it's not considered as cultural appropriation because you were asked by the host of that native, indigenous, foreign culture.
Is it considered respectful at that point?
Absolutely. If you show up with a Western tuxedo in a traditional Korean wedding, you're going to be the odd one out, no matter if you're Korean or not. I had been living in South Korea for 3 years, so it's kind of a topic that's near and dear to my heart, because if you do something, for example, Halloween, this concept always gets brought up around Halloween. If you're walking around in blackface, huge afro, saying, "Oh, look, I'm Bob Marley," and black people, African people of the African diaspora have a problem with it, you better sit at home and do some self-reflection. If you're trying to wear a gisho or qipao or other East Asian, Korean, Chinese, Japanese garment as a sexy outfit, when the original intention for that outfit is not sexy, not have to do with sex work, and East Asian people find a problem with it, you need to listen to their concerns and take them seriously.
Sure. I mean, as an Italian, a person of Italian descent, I'm not going to be offended if you're dressing up like Mario and Luigi, right? That's I don't believe that that's offensive. But to that point, though, Rez, so here's the question I have. My son, who was at the time 2 years old when the whole Moana scenario came out, he loved that movie. He's 2 years old. He doesn't know hate or right from wrong. He just liked the movie, liked the characters. He really wanted to be Maui that particular Halloween, which I didn't find any problem with. He liked that particular person, that character. He felt safe in that character and had admiration for that character. I can't speak for the other people that were dressing up their daughters as Moana, but is that offensive? And at that point in time, how should I feel as a parent telling him no, he can't?
Yeah, so again, like all of us said earlier, intentions do matter. Now, in my opinion, I don't think, if your son dressed up as Maui, that would be offensive. But I'm also not Polynesian. If the Polynesian community at large said, "Hey, don't dress up like us," even if it's Disney characters, then if someone still did it, then yes, that would be offensive. Intentions matter. I personally wouldn't have a problem if someone dressed up as a Desi person or as a Bengali at Halloween representing Bengali culture. I would have a problem if you dressed up in my traditional outfits to represent a dangerous Muslim or a suicide bomber. That's offensive on all accounts. So intentions do matter. Same thing with the Washington football team. That their previous team name the Native American community has made several complaints to the league that it's an offensive name. It's a slur, that R word, and that was culturally appropriated, and that was offensive. That was wrong, and I'm happy that the Washington football team eventually changed their name.
Angela, does this border on free speech infringements? Kind of talk to me from a legal perspective on cultural appropriation, free speech. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, government institutions shouldn't be instituting any policies regarding cultural appropriation because from a government perspective, and community colleges would fall under this purview, for example, then it is a free speech issue. As far as the zeitgeist, the cultural view of free speech, I think it's a free speech issue as well. But maybe we can sort of look back in history a little bit to look at other examples. So sexy nun costume used to be a huge taboo. It really, really pissed off people on the cultural right. Now they sort of frown on it. They're like, that's tacky, it's distasteful, but they're not going to war with you over it. You could look at it two different ways. Maybe in 40 years, people will not care so much about sexy cultural appropriation costumes. Or maybe we're finally catching up with conservatives about their views on offensive costumes. I'm not really sure what the right way to look at it is, but I do think it's appropriate and, helpful to sort of look back and see other areas where this has been an issue, and what's happened to it.
Austin, does this open the door for dialogue, or should we censor what people find offensive?
I think it does open the door for dialogue. A lot of people's cultures, they have to live with that. That's what they were born into. That's what they will experience there in their life. So it's not a one night like Halloween type trip that you can really do to understand the reasoning behind this. Why this garment is blue and why this hat is black. There's thousands of years of history for a lot of these things. As long as you're not up there like painting your face black or making racist slurs or trying to imitate like Southeast Asian accents and stuff, as long as you're invited by the host culture, and I believe it's all right. Just don't go out of your way and try and make vast assumptions. Don't break into somebody's house, their 1,000-year-old house, and try to claim it as your own.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Rez, so if I invite you over for spaghetti and meatballs, are you offended?
No, I'm not offended. Again, it's the representative of that community, how they feel about it. Like that's what it comes down to, essentially.
Are you offended then if I make naan for you?
No. But me personally, I'm also a very liberal guy. Like I'm a liberal, easygoing person. But again, that's not the same as everyone else in my community. Like someone else might be offended by that. I personally am not. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. But again, it matters about what the community feels at large. As for example, when I mentioned earlier in the segment, when Israelis were making dresses out of the Palestinian keffiyeh, it's a society that is under occupation. They were very offended by that, and that's what cultural appropriation is that when a dominant culture appropriates a minority culture. So that was clear present cultural appropriation, and where many would argue is wrong. But if someone dressed in a South Asian garment, I don't think that's offensive. It's all about how the representatives at their community feel about the issue.
Excellent. Well, we hope that you as a viewer got something out of this conversation. If you did, write it in the comments below. Share us on social media. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. And we will see you next time. Bye, guys. Take care.